Okay, so this is a special episode where we're just going to look at Russian state media. Now, I do these daily updates, and if you're not familiar with me, I'm just a professor who's been paying close attention to what's going on in the war, and I'm an American. I'm not Ukrainian. I have no stake in this, but I've been following and tracking, and it's just been fascinating. So, I can see things because patterns emerge, and I'm going to look at Russian state media today. And it doesn't matter what today is because it's essentially the same thing repackaged again and again. So here we go. So this is today. NATO Russia war. Earth will burn and concrete will melt, says Dmitry Medvedev. If you don't know Dmitry Medvedev, he was the former president. Like Putin was president, then Medvedev took his place because it like term limits, and then Putin's president again. So he's like cut out of Putin's kind of cloth. Okay. NATO's hybrid war with Russia, he's talking about. And it is, to some degree, a hybrid war, like indirectly waging war with Russia. If these half-wits continue, the unrestrained supplies of the most dangerous types of weapons to the Kyiv regime, sooner or later, the military campaign will move to another level. That potentially is true. And the West has worked really hard to make sure that they are not getting into a hot war, that they are fighting a proxy war. In this case, Western countries will no longer be able to stay in their clean houses and apartments, laughing at how they masterfully weaken Russia by proxy. Everything around them will be on fire. Their people will experience trouble in full. The earth will be on fire and concrete will melt in the truest sense of the word. We will get to experience big problems as well. Everyone will be in big, big trouble. Well, everyone will include you if it comes to that, because it won't just be in Ukraine. If it comes to the US and to Western Europe and wherever else, this so this will be a bad thing all the way around. But they quote him all the time saying lunatic kinds of stuff like, here's the same thing on RT. Medvedev issues apocalyptic warning to the West over Ukraine. Now again, the reason that this is important is because this is RT, Russia Today. It's being carried, and I've seen many instances where RT will be carried like cut and paste directly in Islamic or Indian or Asian news. Like lazy journalists just cut and paste the whole article, and that's what's carried elsewhere. But this is the kind of stuff that's carried in Russia, and they can't hear other stuff. Okay, and this is his actual telegram, and the Western countries will not be able to sit in their clean houses. What I just quoted, his actual telegram where he's posting this stuff, and he knows what he's doing. He's posting this, it'll get carried, and that's where we are. Okay, other Russian state news. PMC Wagner fighters advancing in Donbass. Okay, so the Wagner was supposed to be these tough contractors. They actually weren't that good, it turned out. They were under-equipped compared to regular Russian military, who was under-equipped. Russia fighters in the private military company Wagner took control of the village of Nikilova Vatora near the Bakhmut highway in Donbas. Okay, so this is what they were saying while Russia, which is okay, Russia is about 1.78 times the size of the United States, right? Ukraine is about the size of Texas, and Russia was controlling about the size of North Carolina within Texas. And Ukraine just took back the size of the state of Delaware, a little bit more than the state of Delaware. And they're talking within that North Carolina and Texas, they're talking about how fighters from the private military company Wagner took back this little village, while Ukraine just took back 6,000 square kilometers. And they're talking about this village. So part of what Pravda does is they kind of tell the truth, but they don't tell much more of the truth. Like they don't tell the whole, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, they're telling part truth. That's maybe they have a pinky up in the air, right? They're telling it like it's probably true that fighters of Wagner did take this village or something near that village or something, or they took a house somewhere. I don't know what they did, but they're not telling the whole story, and that's what they do in Russian state media all the time. Remember, this is just this tiny little village on the outskirts. This is about here, somewhere over here is where they took this village, while Ukraine just took that over the past week, and that's what they're talking about. Okay, next article. Russia conducts massive strikes in Ukraine. Kiev's forces have lost hundreds of troops, and they talk about Russian forces have unleashed heavy barrage on Ukraine army on all fronts, with Kiev's casualties mounting to more than 800 in one day. Okay, sometimes they don't just tell truth, they tell lies. 800 in one day is improbable, especially when they're doing that while they're evacuating. So they're sending an artillery barrage. Okay, so I mean that could kill people, but 800 in a day, I don't think has happened yet. So Zelensky admitted that they had lost upwards of 200 in a day. So if while they're being routed, they're claiming 800 in a day, that's improbable. Now, this goes to an article a couple of days before that where Ukraine lost thousands of soldiers. Now, the Russians would vacillate between either silence or some kind of crazy claims. This is the crazy claim side. Over 4,000 pro-Kiev troops were killed in southern and eastern Ukraine in a 5-day period. And when you do the math, that means 800 a day for 5 days. That's what that amounts to. 4,000 killed and 8,000 wounded between those 5 days. That's 800 killed a day and 1,600 wounded a day while they're retreating, which is just while they're in their redeployment. No, the redeployment was a retreat. It was running away. Run away! I mean, that's what was going on here. And it turned out to be actually what was supposed to be a very prestigious unit that was running away. Okay, here's Pravda RU again. 3 countries not invited to the funeral of Elizabeth II include representatives of Russia, Belarus, and Myanmar. I don't know why Myanmar is there. They're a dictatorship, and I don't know what about them. But Belarus and Russia, I get that they're not invited to the party. That would kind of be like inviting, somebody that had hurt somebody. Yeah, let them come in and mourn at the funeral. It's not exactly going to work. Okay, this is like the least bad of Russian state journalism or Russian state media. Again, it's being consumed in Russia and it's making them think, oh, the British, they're just bad. Well, there's a reason why you're not being invited. Expert, the US is preparing a tank fist in Europe to prevent Russia from saving Europe. Huh? Okay, prevent Russia from saving Europe. Now, part of why I'm showing you this, again, these are all the same day unless I qualify otherwise. The article about 4,000 as opposed to 800 was from 2 days before that. But these are all the same day, right? The United States is creating a powerful tank fist in the eastern part of Europe. Washington is doing everything it can. Listen to this carefully. Washington is doing everything it can so that Moscow cannot help Beijing in the event of a full-scale war over Taiwan, says an analyst. Huh? Moscow, so that Russia can't help Beijing when they go to what? So, but that's the way that they're painting this or framing this. Washington is trying to solve it. So it's not that Washington is helping Ukraine to free the Ukrainians or to telegraph to the Chinese, no, 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 don't do that. Don't do Taiwan, right? Which is what they're actually doing. At least from an American perspective, that's what Washington's doing. No, no. Washington is trying to solve several problems at once, preparing an anti-Russian foothold in Ukraine and Poland. First, the United States provides its military industry with billions of dollars in orders for years to come. Second, they will avoid using American army against Russia, acting at the hands of Ukrainians and Poles, like killing Russians through Ukrainians. But you got to understand, the United States wasn't doing this until you invaded. Like you're forgetting the cause behind the effect. There's an effect there, but the cause is that you rolled over the border of your neighbor in order to take over and make it a subset of your own country. So they don't tell the whole truth as I told you before, and they have a really strange framing of some things. Okay, here's another. Russia and China agree over new reality, says the Kremlin. So they do actually want to see a world that's instead of unipolar, which is like dominated by the United States and Europe and other free nations, they want to see a world where there's a counterbalance where Russia and Beijing are at the epicenter of this, and just as the United States and Europe are at the epicenter of the other pole. We believe, in unison with our Chinese comrades, that the existence of a unipolar world is impossible, says Peskov. The so-called golden billion is claiming the right to invent rules and economy in politics and right to impose its will on others. Okay, so they talk about this kind of thing a lot in the Russian state media. And so the golden billion is not a term I was familiar with before this invasion. The golden billion refers to wealthy populations in the US, EU, and other Western nations. And it's somehow like, it's almost like a Marxism kind of 2.0, like they're the bourgeoisie and they're bad. And except they run the international order. And the international order is like you can't run over your neighbor because they're weaker and take them over and make them part of your state. And that's terrible. We need to do something, stand up to that. Peskov echoed the words of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said in late August that the, quote, obsolete unipolar model is being superseded by a new world order based on fundamental principles of justice, equality. Wait a minute, what? A new world order based on the fundamental principles of justice, equality, and the recognition of the right of each nation and state to its sovereign path of development. So what are they doing in Ukraine? Well, I mean, this is part of, they're rooting out the neo-Nazis and actually making justice and equality and the recognition of a state to its sovereign path of development. No, they're not. I mean, like they can say these things with a straight face, a new world order. Like, what are we looking at? Putin and his Chinese counterpart, President Xi, are expected to hold a meeting later this week on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in Uzbekistan. It's Xi's first trip outside China since the break of COVID. So that'll be interesting. And I'm starting to read Chinese state media just to see like what they're saying as well. Beijing refused to join the international sanctions imposed on Moscow over its military operation in Ukraine. They're kind of playing it both ways. They don't want to get Western sanctions because they're very dependent on trade. And they also are trying to support Putin. But I think the way that this is going to work out is that Russia has always been like the older brother to the younger brother of China. And I think this is now going to be the older brother and this is the younger brother in that scenario. And it's like you can see it shifting. Just like China is kind of like the older brother to North Korea. I mean, North Korea couldn't be so crazy talk if China wasn't there to back them or Russia wasn't there to back them. Same kind of thing. Okay, one more. Russian MP declares the need for full-scale mobilization. Now, this was a few days ago. This was not today, like the other articles. But I think he's right that they're never going to win without full-scale mobilization. But again, this is the kind of thing that they're starting to read in Russia, and so I think they might be thinking along, preparing some kind of line toward that end, and that's actually terrifying because Russia can't win without full-scale mobilization. I'm pretty convinced of that now. But if they full-scale mobilize, it could go into a third world war, and that could be very bad. Okay, that's where we are. If you have enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit that bell because I do these daily updates, and I've done them for more than 100 days, and I'm trying to keep people informed so that they understand what's going on in Ukraine so that they can actually counter the Russian propaganda. When crazy Uncle Harry at dinner says some Russian talking point, you are armed and equipped to understand what's going on and to know this is actually what's going on. Thank you for your time. Have a good one. See you tomorrow.